The time is World War II. The place, Poland. The war seems never ending, but life must go on. Life in this story as seen through the eyes of a 5-year-old girl. With a self-absorbed mother indifferent to her child, a father imprisoned in Siberia, 2 old grandparents, what does life hold for them? The story is called No Kisses. It's by our new contributor, Grynglas of Surface Paradise. No Kisses is from her brilliant new book, 5-Minute Hero and Other Stories. I'm Kim Dodsworth, Queensland storyteller.
You're your daddy's daughter. Go to him. Mum shouts when asked to tie the ribbons to the ends of my plaits. Did I ask too much? All I wanted was a minute to be near her, to smell the scent of lilac on her body and breathe the perfumed air around her. For that I'm angrily reprimanded, and it hurts like hell. I can't deny that I'm proud to be a daddy's girl. He calls me Nusia, not Anusia, not even Anya, but just Nusia. On occasions when Mum is irritated with me, she calls me Unka. My mum's friends seem full of admiration for my bright mind, and ask me silly questions. They always say my answers are smart, like an adult's, not at all childish. I'm not pretty, just a skinny little girl with straight sandy hair who never feels hunger. There's nothing wrong with the fact I love my daddy and want him all to myself, but so does my mother. Whenever he happily plays with me and the house fills with laughter, I feel Mum slowly becoming irritated. She slams doors, bumps plates noisily on the table, and asks him to help with whatever she's doing, just to interfere with our play. My dad works long hours driving steam trains hundreds of kilometres into the country. Our time spent together is few and far between, but they are unforgettable precious moments. Daddy promised to take me to the zoo to celebrate my 5th birthday. I can hardly wait. I'm so full of anticipation, I can think of nothing else. Today is the day for my dream adventure. But where's my father? My mother is the most beautiful and energetic woman in the world. Her long blonde hair and taste for expensive clothes is often a subject of admiration and envy amongst her friends. Everyone in town knows how she enjoys being the centre of attention. She's comfortable ensuring her friends' eyes focus just on her. Her contagious laugh and easygoing ways draw people to her like a magnet. I like watching her joking happily with friends. Sometimes the temptation to mess up her day muddles my mind, especially when she looks so adorable. It's times like that when I imagine her laughing and giggling and dancing my dad around the room, and an envious, piercing sadness overrides my mind. I tell myself that someday I'll have a husband just like my dad and dance him around the room. It's late afternoon, and suddenly all kinds of bad things have started to happen. I forget about my bad intentions when Mum arrives home in a terrible mess, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Grandpa gazes at her. His face turns ashen. With no words, he puts his arm around her shoulders and holds her close, like a precious doll, to calm her nerves. Mum seems unresponsive. "Where have I gone wrong?" she cries. "Why am I cursed? What can I do about it?" At the table she sits lamenting, rocking her body back and forth. "Where have I gone wrong?" "Shush, baby, shush," he says. "Why are you cross, Mum?" I fearfully ask. "Did I do something wrong? If I did, I'm sorry." Ignoring my questions, Mum irritably waves me away, then pushes me aside and runs to her room. The door slams behind her. Later on, Grandma reveals the most horrible news. Stalin's people had arrested my father and sent him to Siberia. It made me think beyond what I was able to comprehend. I didn't understand. How could this be? One day my father is at home, the next day he's at work driving the train, but now he's disappeared entirely from our life. Did he forget about taking me to the zoo? I'm eager to ask Mum questions, but don't know where to start, or how to approach her without triggering another outburst. Our house, filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, feels bigger without my dad, but terribly empty. Just be quiet, baby. Your mum is going through a difficult time right now, whispers Grandpa when I tell him how I'm feeling. I am quiet, but there's nothing for me to engage my mind with, except to remember to stay away from adults and occupy myself. In my favourite corner of the room, where it's dark and secluded, I sit alone, motionless, thinking. My imaginary world is beautiful and perfect, unlike the real one, which is full of unanswered questions. Sitting here in my corner with my own company makes me feel safe. This situation isn't new for me. For a large part of my growing up, I was left to my own devices, with no one to look after me. My mother and grandma never had the time. If she left the house early, she never asked if I was hungry or needed help with dressing. It was then I created a fantasy world with simple games and imaginary heroes to keep my mind occupied. The easiness with which I might destroy the world that I had created, but never did, gave me great pleasure. My people are too busy to worry about me. Who can blame them? Fear of the unknown and chaos of the war is dominating their lives. Often I'm left to my own devices. It doesn't bother me too much, although I crave cuddles and to play with my dad. In our house, there's no room for love or play. What is Siberia, Mum? I dare to ask. It's a land of constant snow, she snaps, and don't come bothering me about it again. Who do you think you are to harass me? She turns away, angry. I swallow hard at her verbal assault. Despite being tempted to ask more, I realize she has closed our conversation with a single statement. Her shoulders have slumped. She's shaking, waving me away so I won't see her tears. She needs to be left alone. It must be hard for Daddy, but I've learned not to ask any more questions and not to disturb Mum in her duties. It makes her lose her temper. It's so hard to imagine my dad living in a place of never-melting snow. A wave of sadness hits me every time I think of him. Longing for my dad becomes more unbearable each day. I can almost see him out there, shivering in the frozen snow. The bleary images of my father soon melt away, and I feel unhappy again. This silent, empty house, where I cannot share my thoughts, has become very sombre. Mum keeps her distance from me. Sometimes I feel like a cuckoo bird put in the wrong nest, left to find my own way. The need to be loved consumes my mind, but Mum never touches me, never puts her arms around my shoulder. She doesn't sit around being lazy. Together with my grandma and my frail grandfather, they take care of everything around the house. Mother's efforts to find the reason my father was sent to Siberia continually absorb her. Granny said my mother would move heaven and earth to know my father's destination, but her inquiries and searches go unanswered. I often hear her crying in the privacy of her room. Does she know my dad's future? When we sit together with Granny, the silence scares me, and I wonder where our lives will take us. My deepest fear is that one day Mum will not come home from her trips to the offices, and I'll be alone with my fragile grandparents forever. My 5th birthday was forgotten. It was a miserable day. Neither Mum nor Grandma mentioned it. No one has told me about the first days and months of my life, or about my first tooth or first word. The women don't have time for such luxuries. Only my grandfather has patience for me. He finds time to spend with me between his simple jobs around the house. His patience is adorable as he teaches me to read and write, and helps me to memorize poems that he recites. My world now feels brighter than ever. The autumn afternoon seems long. A strong wind is blowing golden leaves from the nearby maple trees into our doorway. I collect a few nice ones to use in my theatre for the paper dolls and homemade rag animals who play my heroes. I've taken a fancy to playing on my own. After last night's storm, my mother and Granny need to repair our front fence, damaged by a fallen tree. It's as windy as hell out here. Stay inside, Anusia. Play with your dolls. Be a good girl, Grandma says. We won't be long, interrupts Mum. I nod in reply before being shut away with my own silence. The prospect of being home alone doesn't bother me. It's nothing new. If only I had a friend to talk with and play. But after the recent event with my father, the neighbours have kept to themselves and avoided us. In my imaginary world, I turn to my makeshift toys and take them to the little nook between my small bed, the wall, and the large tiled oven. Here, where it is quiet and warm, I create better lives for my imaginary friends. In my theatre, I curl up into a ball on the wooden floor and fall asleep in my hideaway. Suddenly, in a half-dream state, the chaotic voices of shouting women reach my ears and wake me. Anusia! Lucia! Where is my girl? How can she just vanish like that, without a trace? Mum's voice seems despairing, other voices cross and cranky. We've been everywhere already. Alert the neighbours. There's no sign of her. Where else could we look for my girl? That's my granny lamenting. Hearing that, I tiptoe to the front door, open it, and step outside, trying to understand what is going on. I blink and rub my eyes. A group of people gather at the door and point at me, shouting to each other. My sudden appearance seems to have taken them by surprise. Rapidly they surround me, happy to see me alive and well. They stare at me and delicately touch me as though I am a miracle. A woman kisses and cuddles me. Even my mum, who is usually glum and distant, seems to have changed. Her face radiates with joy as she embraces me. Her smell of lilac overcomes me as she gently strokes my hair. I feel elated and want to kiss her, but there's no point trying to be close. Now I'm found. She has lost interest and mixes with the other women and their chatter. Granny asks plenty of questions that I'm unable to answer, so I decide to take them to our room and show them my hideaway. The women stare in disbelief and raise their eyebrows. That's my girl. For a brief moment, I feel like an important person. Give us a hug, Granny says, her eyes wet with tears of joy. Her rush of tenderness impresses me, but it also makes me feel uneasy having so much attention. Fortunately, the women soon leave the room and quietly return to their homes and duties. What a relief to be with just Mum and Granny. For a long time I savour the signs of affection with girlish delight. Daddy would be proud of me. They said they had looked for me around the house, but had missed my dark little corner. It was then they ran around the town, raising the alarm amongst the neighbours. Grandma said I was absent for a good 2 hours. Despite the euphoria that has now settled down, my mother is unable to calm her nerves. We have eaten dinner, and she keeps gazing at me with obvious irritation. What do you think your father would say if he were here? I don't know, Mum, I answer softly, expecting more tongue-lashing. You should thank your lucky stars that Daddy isn't here. He'd give you a hiding you'd never forget. Her words hurt like a whip. My face burns, but I have the dignity not to argue. All evening I feel sad and stay awake in my bed thinking. I can stand any punishment, if only my dad were home. I miss him so much. Waiting for the return of my father had seemed a lifetime. I'm now a young woman with a child of my own. Will he recognize me when finally we meet? Will he call me Nusia? To my enjoyment, he's being released from the Russian labor camp in Siberia. He's coming home. I understand his rehabilitation will take time, but when he feels able, we'll make the trip that he promised me, to the zoo. Well, I'm sure you enjoyed our story, No Kisses, by Anna Grynglas of Surfers Paradise. I hope you'll listen again this time next week when I'll have another short story of quality for you. I'm Kim Dodsworth, Queensland storyteller.